Welcome back, everyone. We are ready to get into the Week 4 quarterback and running back matchups. Not a whole lot of injuries this week to talk about. We did break down Thursday Night Football on yesterday's episode, but I will let you guys know, where I have these guys ranked at the moment. The rankings are up at upperhandfantasy.com. Full positional and flex rankings are updated and there. Okay, so we got the Packers-Lions game tonight. Let's start on the Lions side of the ball. I have Jared Goff as my QB 21 for the week. That could seem a little low for a lot of people, but a lot of decent quarterbacks have good matchups this week. I think normal weeks you'll probably see Goff in the 15, 16 range-ish, somewhere around there. I have Jahmyr Gibbs as my RB14 this week. David Montgomery is out. Well, he's not declared out, but he's not expected to play. Okay, so if you have David Montgomery in your lineups, make sure to potentially have to take him out. Okay, just monitor that. He hasn't been declared out, but the expectation is that he will not play tonight. Okay. But good matchup for Jahmyr Gibbs on the ground this week. So hoping that, he obviously hasn't come through fantasy-wise. The opportunity has been there over the last 2 weeks. It should increase going into this week. Hopefully he gets more work in the receiving game. Listen, he had a lot of carries last week. If he added some receptions to that, some targets to that, we would have been happy with the production. Okay, and it's going to come. That's where his skill set is. Those days are coming. He looks good. I don't see a situation where, he face plants this year or anything like that. He's going to come through at some point, okay? At wide receiver, I'm on Ross St. Brown, sitting at wide receiver 10 for the week for me. And Josh Reynolds is at wide receiver 44. And then I have Sam Laporta at tight end 6th on the week. He's doing his best this season, breaking records as a rookie. You love to see it. So he's a must start this week. On the Packers side, we have Jordan Love at QB 10, Aaron Jones at QB 11. I moved him down just a little bit, after kind of looking at the matchup a little bit. Where do I have him? I have him at 12 now, actually. There is a chance that they limit him just a little bit. He's the type of guy who gets it done, off of efficiency, not necessarily a ton of volume. So he will be in my lineup tonight, most likely, assuming that I don't have these baller running backs on my team. The Lions have been stingy against the run. They've given up a third least rushing yards to running backs, and they've given up only 2.87 yards per carry to running backs this year. They kept Bijan quiet last week. Okay, so that tells you what you need to know, especially, him running behind that offensive line. Okay, so just keep this in mind if you're trying to make any decisions at the running back position this week. And then A.J. Dillon, we're punting him, into the darkness. Christian Watson, who's expected to play at 28. So that moves Jaden Reed, Romeo Doubs down to wide receiver 48 and wide receiver 49 respectively. Both are flex plays. I think Reed does have the better matchup between these two guys out of the slot this week. All right, moving on. The games to target this week, Dolphins and the Bills. Obviously, this is a high-scoring game, 54-point total. In Buffalo, the Bills are favored by 2.5 points. The other two games to target, the Raiders and the Chargers game. We'll see if Jimmy G ends up playing or not. But he's in the concussion protocol right now. We'll see if he's able to get out of that by Sunday. The Seahawks are at the Giants on Monday night with a 47.5 projected point total. Okay, so that's another game you could take a look at. I do have Josh Allen at number 1 in my QB rankings because of the matchup with Miami. A lot of scoring. There's going to be an actual need for Josh Allen to do his thing in this game, unlike the previous 2 weeks. So he has a very high ceiling in this game. Okay, I have 2 at 4. For the same reasons. Okay, I have him ahead of Justin Herbert, ahead of Kirk Cousins, who, by the way, the latter is leading all quarterbacks in fantasy scoring so far this year. Not sure how much he's going to have to throw the ball against Carolina, though, at home. I was juggling between Lamar Jackson and Anthony Richardson at 7 and 8. I have Lamar higher right now. This is a tougher matchup for Lamar, but he got the edge here. We just have a bigger sample size with him. We really just have a less than a game and a half of a sample with Anthony Richardson at this point. He also has a relatively tough matchup based on how quarterbacks have done against the Rams so far. But Richardson, the upside, it's apparent, right? I talked about him on last week's buy-sell show as someone we should be buying because he does have the upside to be a top 5 quarterback this year. He is progressing out of the concussion protocol. He's not completely out just yet as of this moment, but he should be good to go this week. I have Joe Burrow at 10. He has a great matchup against the Titans. He was definitely not 100%. This past week, right? We saw that on primetime. How healthy he's going to be this week, that's the question because the matchup is really, really good. So I'm willing to start him against Tennessee this week. CJ Stroud actually rounds out my top 12 quarterbacks this week at home against Pittsburgh. He has weapons that he trusts, right? Pittsburgh has been allowing a lot of production to wide receivers this year. I had Daniel Jones up in this top 12 earlier in the week, but I just can't trust him, as much, right? I do think the upside is there, big time this week. I'm just a little worried that the offense gets a little stale without Saquon Barkley in the backfield. But like I mentioned, this game is one that you might want to target. He's just a big upside play at the quarterback position if that's what you need this week to get a win. They're going up against the Seahawks. They have allowed a ton of fantasy points to quarterbacks so far this year. All right, so let's move on to running backs. The top 3 running backs are pretty much set right now for me. That's Christian McCaffrey, Tony Pollard, and Bijan Robinson. Okay. Bijan obviously had a bad game last week. That just tells you how good this Lions defense has become. And then I have Kyren Williams at 4. 100% of snaps last week, 97% of snaps the week before, running around on 80% of dropbacks, 18% and 22% target share. Absolutely ridiculous workload, right? He's getting all the work on a functioning offense. He's a top 5 running back until further notice. Didn't get it done in the box score last week, but I wouldn't really get discouraged at all. Now, do I expect Kyren to play 100% of snaps the rest of the season? No. They will likely get another running back involved at some point. But even if he moves down to, let's say 70% of snaps, he's still going to be an RB1. In terms of snaps and workload, there's a little bit of a drop-off to the next tier of guys. I have Kenneth Walker at 5 against the Giants. Great matchup. We talked about Charbonnet moving in a little bit, but regardless, this is a great spot for him at home on Monday night. Travis Etienne is at 6 against Atlanta. This is a kind of a neutral matchup, but Travis Etienne, we've seen that when the Jags are in the game, he's going to get a lot of work. I have James Cook at 7 against Miami this week. Remember that game where Josh Kelly actually looked good a few weeks ago? That was against Miami in week 1. This should be a much closer game than what Buffalo had the last 2 weeks. I'd expect Cook to handle most of the running back opportunities in this game. Latavius Murray ended up with 5 carries last week, but he got all that work on the Bills' last drive in a blowout. Right, so Miami's allowed the 6th most rushing yards to running backs. That includes them having an extremely positive game script for Miami last week, right? So teams aren't going to be running the ball against that. So this is a very good matchup for Cook. In a much closer game in week 1, Cook ended up handling 67% of the rushing attempts compared to only 50% over the last 2 weeks in these blowouts, according to Fantasy Life data. So I'd expect his opportunity share to be a lot higher this week than what we saw over the last 2 weeks in blowouts. I have Josh Jacobs at 8 against the Chargers. I'm pretty sure I moved Jacobs down just a little bit. I did, actually. So after James Cook, I actually have Zach Moss at 8, Raheem Mostert at 9, and then Josh Jacobs at 10. So, why don't we jump ahead to Zach Moss real quick. 22 opportunities in week 2, 33 opportunities last week. Keep starting him, right? The Rams are giving up 4.63 yards per carry to running backs, so not really a matchup we should be worried about, okay? Raheem Mostert, what can I say after last week, right? High scoring game in Buffalo too this week. Very hard not to play him, right, after what he did last week. Hopefully he carries some of that momentum into week 4. But Devon Achane also went off, obviously, but I don't think Mostert did anything to lose his job as the primary guy. So, right, we saw Breece Hall have multiple big runs against Buffalo in week 1, and we know there's some big playability here in this backfield, right, specifically with Mostert. Josh Jacobs, a good matchup. It has to click at some point for Jacobs. He's expected 16.1 fantasy points per game based on his opportunities so far. He's only averaged 10 PPR points per game, so something's got to give here. There will likely be a regression for Jacobs coming soon because I don't think this is a situation where he's just washed, right? He's going to bounce back. Hopefully it'll be this week. They're going to have to depend on him, especially if Jimmy G is out with that concussion. Now, I have Alexander Mattison at 11 this week. All right, that might be kind of high for some people, but who knows if Cam Akers will play, but the way that Madison played last week, I'm not sure there's much reason to start taking much work away from him. This is a great matchup against Carolina. The game script should be there with Bryce Young back behind center. And besides the Broncos and the Bears, the Panthers have given up the most fantasy points to running backs through 3 weeks. Madison played a season-high 79% of snaps last week, had a season-high target share, got all the 2-minute work for the first time this season, and had his best finish of the season. So 2 top 18 finishes for Madison so far. I think he has a chance at a top 10 finish this week. Alvin Kamara's back this week. I have him at 13. He's the guy in this backfield right now. I can see him playing, 70% of snaps off the jump. This rushing offense hasn't been good so far. I'm hoping that Kamara can improve it. The Bears had success running the ball against Tampa Bay a couple weeks ago. So did DeAndre Swift last week. Madison not so much in week 1, but I think Kamara should get at least 15 touches in this game, with a good portion of that coming in the receiving game. The hope is that he gets even more than that. I can see him getting 20 touches based on, Kendra Miller not looking amazing, over that, last week, and Tony Jones, not really deserving much work himself, right? So we'll see how that works with Alvin Kamara coming back, but most likely he will be in my lineup this week. So those are like the top 13, 14 running backs there. I have Derrick Henry, Ramondre Stevenson at 15 and 16 respectively. Stevenson has a little bit of a tough matchup. We did see Zeke kind of working a little bit more than we usually do last week. Ramondre's snaps went down to 64%. Rushing attempts went down to 49% from the 60% mark he was at in the first 2 weeks. And Zeke ended up getting 41% rushing attempts, which is a season high for him. Now, they went up against the Jets last week. This was a situation where they just needed to run the ball. Is this going to be something that sticks? I don't think so, which is why I want to buy Ramondre here. But because this is also a tough matchup, I don't have super high expectations for Ramondre. But if the Patriots want to win this game, I do think that the way to try to attack Dallas is kind of slow their pass rush down and run the ball. So let's see what they do. Let's see if they end up doing that. And let's see if they attack, through the air by this backfield, because that's where Ramondre really shines. I have DeAndre Swift at 17. I have no problem moving DeAndre Swift up here, and I think I will, to be honest with you. I kind of have more confidence in DeAndre Swift than I do in Derrick Henry, Ramondre Stevenson right now. So I might move him up to 15 against Washington. We saw James Cook have a pretty good day against Washington last week. So I think I'm moving DeAndre Swift up to 15 behind Alvin Kamara, behind Jahmyr Gibbs. If you want to start Swift over Gibbs, I totally understand that. But without Montgomery, I'm giving Gibbs another chance tonight. I moved up Devon Achane to 18 this week. I mean, this is a risk. Obviously, I have no idea, how much work he's going to get in this game. This was a really, really good 1-2 punch last week. I think they go back to the well. They're trying to win the division here. This is a division opponent. I think they're going to bring it all out, right? I think Achane is a big part of that. So I have him at 18 here. This is a boom-bust type of play for me. I still think Raheem Mostert's the 1A here, but Achane, let's see how they use him. Okay, so I'm going to put him at 18 ahead of guys like Jerome Ford and Miles Sanders, Javonte Williams. And, I got a lot of questions about Javonte this week. I do think that this is a great matchup. Javonte hasn't looked amazing. He did look a lot better last week, but it was a good matchup, right? So keep that in mind. This is a very good matchup for Javonte, but how many touches does he actually get? If the Broncos do go up, which I do expect them to do, I think Javonte Williams, could end up with 15 carries for 60 yards and a touchdown. That's kind of what my expectations are. Not a whole lot more than that right now. So yeah, that's going to do it for the top 20 running backs here. Just a couple of more highlights. Dude, I moved down Najee Harris all the way down to RB34, even though he has a good matchup this week. And I have Jaylen Warren ahead of him. Jaylen Warren has outproduced Najee Harris 3 straight weeks for fantasy. Okay, so I do have Jaylen Warren at 30 this week. Okay, I have Breece Hall at 29. This is a situation where, he is getting more opportunity, which is what you want to see. He is getting a much higher share of the workload that's been going up each and every week. And now he's finally, considerably above where Dalvin Cook was, right, last week. So that's great. But this is a situation where KC, they're likely going to go up in this game. The Jets are at home, so maybe they give Patrick Mahomes some trouble. But I do expect Mahomes to still get it done. And, we'll see if Breece Hall is going to be able to get those opportunities in a close game. I'm really interested to see what Khalil Herbert and Roschon Johnson do against Denver. Obviously, they're at home. This seems like a game where, everyone's talking shit about the Bears, and Khalil Herbert and Roschon could get it done against a Denver team who, they did what they did last week, and they gave up what they gave up last week to the Miami Dolphins, right? Can Khalil Herbert and Roschon Johnson do a poor man's job of that, right? That's what I'm looking forward to watching this week. And I kind of hope they do, because the Bears have just been piled on, right? I guess deservedly so, right? I get it. But it would be cool to see them, kind of do their thing. And, maybe come away with a victory, all right? By the way, I just want to mention one thing with Justin Fields. Since we're on the topic of the Bears, his design rushing attempts did go up. Remember, that was our concern with Justin Fields. But in week 3, Justin Fields, his design rushing attempts was at 10% in week 1, 20% in week 2, and then went all the way up to 32% in week 3. So that's exactly what we want to see. Okay, if that continues, Justin Fields has a chance of becoming what he was last year. Okay, I'm just saying. Is he a buy low? Yeah, because you can get him for pennies. Throw him on your bench. You don't have to start him right now. See what happens. If this was week 10 last year, like, you would have loved to have Justin Fields as your fantasy quarterback. He was a league winner. Okay, so keep that in mind. That's going to do it for this episode, guys. I really appreciate it. If you could take out 1 second and just subscribe to the podcast, hit follow on the podcast app. Tomorrow, me and Zach are going to be back, and we're going to be talking about wide receivers and tight ends going into week 4. Okay, so go check that out. And yeah, we'll see you soon. Take it easy. Bye-bye.